Hey guys. Okay, so before anything else, I gotta say, JC Staff, you did that Weisz fight right. Like, holy shit. Like, you can tell just within the fight of Weisz versus Baku where JC Staff's budget went, and oh my god, was that shit worth it. I'm just saying. Like, okay. But okay. So, this is definitely one of those fights where everything is happening so fast all at once that in some ways it can be a little jarring and tiring to keep track of everything properly. But one thing I want to start with are the dynamics of the fights in this episode. Obviously, being Shiki versus Kurenai in her Kurenai Dragoon armor, and Weisz versus Baku, because despite their opponents obviously being much bigger in size, you'll notice there are certain similarities in how these fights are playing out in comparison to the fights that happened in the Mildian arc, like with Shiki and Weisz engage, like the ones that, especially that Shiki and Weisz engaged in during Xiaomei's little tournament, like on Mildian, like during their fights during Xiaomei's tournament, their opponents had very similar abilities, albeit the Kurenai Dragoon has a lot more firepower than the Metallic Boxer guy did. But yeah, it's pretty much a very similarly constructed fight, and you'll see this pattern continue with Rebecca's fight as well. But the reason I guess I'm bringing this comparison up at all is because it is something worth taking into account when these fights end. I mean, obviously the Eden Zero crew are the heroes of the story, so they're going to defeat Kurenai or men regardless. But just by getting these small little similarities shows that Xiaomei has prepared them for this fight even before they set foot on Sunjul. So it's just good to kind of remember this little correlation, because people have developed a bit too much of a tendency to easily call out BS with this kind of stuff in mushroom stories nowadays, and it even gives Mildian arc a more narrative value than just being a simple side filler quest, I find. So yeah, it's just something to remember. Getting to the elephant in the room, though, there is more than a fair share amount of CGI used in the fight between Shiki and Kurenai Dragoon, and honestly, this is kind of one of those odd times where more than a majority of times throughout the episode, I thought the CGI actually did work, and I think that is because, unlike when you're animating a person or more organic being, the CGI does give that more metallic sheen to the Kurenai Dragoon and make it seem like more of a robot. But at the same time, I can't deny either, there was also the odd moment here and there where there still was enough of a separation between the 2D and the 3D to make the movements themselves a little bit awkward and janky every so often. But again, I can't say it's a huge problem for me either, because it's still done a lot better. It's still one of the better uses of CGI I've seen. Like, obviously we all like it if CGI wasn't used in anime, period, but honestly, when it's done well, I think we do need to acknowledge that, and this was kind of one of the better uses of it, honestly. Even putting that aside, though, yeah, this entire episode in some ways could be boiled down to Kurenai going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Like, it's not a shock that she's insane, but the level of just true mental derangement she's devolved into with this episode is genuinely unsettling. And as someone mentioned this in the comment section of one of the channels who were streaming this episode. But yeah, Azula is like, Kurenai at this point is at Azula level of crazy. Like, she's pretty much batshit at this point, and she's willing to kill everyone and everything that gets in her way. And yeah, in some ways it kind of makes her a more sympathetic character, but at the same time it does also really show that, yeah, she can just kick her ass. Like, yeah, it's one of those things. With that said, let's talk about Weiss's new suit, though, because obviously this episode is the official debut of Weiss's new battle armor suit or whatever. Which obviously it's funny as hell, even more so in the anime, that the manga to see Weisz get just hammered up as this like hero figure he sees himself as now that he's in this armor. But just on a technical level, one thing I never really appreciated about Weisz's suit before is how he uses his powers in conjunction with the suit. Like, you can tell Hermit kind of tailor-made it for that purpose, but at the same time, it's not like he's a total power. It's not like he's a total powerhouse either, as the episode like did make sure to reinforce that even though Weisz was hitting Baku hard as hell in this episode, he was also draining the suit's power a lot. So it shows that even though Weisz is powerful, Weisz did ultimately win in the end. He does need to work towards actually managing the power output of the suit as he uses it in the future. Also, if I'm being honest, like Weisz's battle armor and the Kurenai Dragoon kind of started a trend I'm not entirely a fan of, which is there will always be that one opponent throughout the series now who's gonna get a mech suit, which I get. This is a more futuristic world. There's going to be technology like that. But the bigger problem is they more like every single one of these mech suits more or less looks all the same. There's not a whole lot of variety among them. Although on the other hand, in terms of this just being the first debut of the Arsenal armor, it makes me realize Mashima was going for a 2-for-1 in terms of Shiki's fight on Mildian, because while obviously Shiki's fight on Mildian did prepare him for the fight with Kurenai, fighting that steel robot fighter I think was also Zhao Mei's way of kind of taking a small jab at Weisz's battle armor. Like, yeah, this is what Weisz is going to more or less look like in the future when he dons that battle armor. So yeah. And yeah, once again, Drakken Joe proves he is not someone to fuck with, because as seen in this episode, he basically hacks into and gains control of Kurenai's satellite cannon. And yet, like, obviously that in itself is scary, but the scariest part about it is why he did it, because as he said himself, that this is basically down payment for the money she owed, for the money Kurenai owed him, like showing at the end of the day, everything he does is business. That's really all it is. And in some ways, this is going to be a weird comparison, but looking back on it now, Drakken Joe in a lot of ways reminds me of Cutler Beckett from the Pirates of the Caribbean films. He's cold and calculating in everything he does, but at the end of the day, it isn't like anything malicious. It's just business. Like he's a crime lord, but he's a he's a crime lord and he's a businessman. That's all he is. That's all he sees himself as. When applying like the Cutler Beckett thing to Drakken to what Drakken is, it makes him even more of a terrifying foil, because just this small display of stealing Kurenai's weapon shows he has the money, he has the power, he has the resources, and he has the ability to outpace the competition at every turn. Like, understand, this isn't just some random thing he did. This is him outmaneuvering and out strategizing Kurenai. This one act shows how much of a tactician's brain Drakken actually has. He isn't a dumb villain, and it builds him up even more as the kind of threat he'll be when Shiki and those come face to face with him. Like, he's the kind of threat. Again, it's kind of hard to get into without giving away spoilers, but let's just say he's the kind of threat that teamwork and friendship alone just is not going to be able to defeat unless you can outmaneuver him as well. That's just the cold hard truth of it, and that's on full display in this episode. And yeah, it's insane. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. I'm on Twitter, Analyst, Crunchyroll. Be sure to hit the notification bell, hit the subscribe button, and just share the video around, guys. Dark Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, everyone.